Officer Daniels had been on patrol for nearly 6 hours straight, driving through the same stretch of highway and small town roads. The night had been uneventful, too quiet, in fact. He decided to pull into a small gas station on the outskirts of town, a place he'd stopped at many times before. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, illuminating the empty parking lot, and the faint buzz of a neon "Open" sign cut through the stillness of the night. Daniels stepped out of his cruiser, stretching his legs, thinking only about grabbing a cup of hot coffee before continuing his shift. As he walked toward the glass doors, he noticed something strange. The station looked alive on the outside, but inside there was an odd heaviness in the air. Behind the counter stood a young gas station worker, barely in his 20s, wearing a faded uniform shirt, and nervously shifting his weight from one foot to the other. The moment the officer's shadow fell across the door, the young man's eyes flicked up, and for a second, Daniels thought he saw fear flash across his face before he quickly looked away. Daniels pushed the door open, the bell above it chiming softly. The inside smelled faintly of gasoline and cheap coffee, the usual scent he was used to in late night stops like this. But something felt off. The cashier's movements were stiff, mechanical, like he was going through the motions but his mind was somewhere else. He didn't greet Daniels like he usually would. Instead, his lips parted as if he wanted to say something, then closed just as quickly. The officer's instincts, sharpened from years of experience, whispered that something wasn't right. He walked casually toward the counter, eyes scanning the shelves around him, pretending not to notice the young man's trembling hands. Daniels had learned to pay attention to the small details, the way someone's voice wavered, the way their eyes avoided contact, the subtle signs of someone under pressure. And tonight, every alarm bell in his head was ringing. The young worker rang up the coffee with quick, almost jittery movements, his eyes darting toward the back of the store for a fraction of a second. Daniels caught it. By the time Daniels reached for his wallet, the air in the room seemed heavier. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more happening beneath the surface. That this wasn't just another quiet stop for caffeine. The boy's nervous energy was practically radiating, like he was silently begging for help but too afraid to say the words out loud. Daniels slid a bill across the counter, waiting to see what would happen next. As the receipt printer whirred to life, Officer Daniels expected nothing more than a thin strip of paper with his total printed on it, but the young cashier moved with unusual urgency. Instead of handing it over immediately, he snatched it from the machine, lowered his head as if double, checking the amount, and then quickly scribbled something on the back with the pen chained to the counter. His movements were so subtle, so fast, that if Daniels hadn't been watching closely, he might have missed it entirely. The officer raised an eyebrow, but didn't let his face betray suspicion. He knew better than to draw attention in an environment where something dangerous might be brewing. The cashier slid the receipt across the counter with a trembling hand, avoiding direct eye contact. It looked like a normal transaction, an ordinary piece of paper, yet Daniels' instincts screamed that this was anything but ordinary. He took the slip calmly, stuffed it into his palm with his change, and nodded politely, playing along as though nothing had happened. The moment Daniels stepped outside and pushed open the glass door, the cool night air rushed over him. He walked steadily toward his patrol car, his heartbeat quickening with each step. Sliding into the driver's seat, he turned slightly so that the store remained in his line of vision. Only then did he unfold the crumpled receipt in his hand. What he saw written in shaky, rushed handwriting made his breath catch. 2 words, underlined with desperation. "Help, he has a gun. Don't leave." A chill ran down Daniels' spine. His training kicked in instantly. He knew he couldn't show panic, couldn't act too quickly. Every second mattered now. He glanced back at the gas station through the windshield, his eyes narrowing. From the outside, the store looked perfectly normal. Cars were still fueling at the pumps. The cashier was standing where he had been, trying to act calm. To any passerby, it was just another late night stop. But Daniels now knew that inside, danger was lurking, hidden just out of sight. He folded the receipt back into his hand and gripped the steering wheel tightly, forcing himself to stay composed. The young worker had taken a risk, a huge one, to get that message across. That meant whatever was happening inside was serious, and the wrong move could cost lives. Daniels' mind raced with possibilities. Was the suspect watching the cashier's every move? Were there other hostages inside? One thing was certain, he couldn't drive away. The situation was far from routine, and now, every second was a countdown. From his patrol car, Officer Daniels studied the gas station through narrowed eyes. On the surface, it was calm. Customers moving in and out, the hum of fluorescent lights spilling out onto the pavement. Yet with the receipt's desperate message burning in his hand, every ordinary movement seemed sinister. He forced himself to slow his breathing, to see past the illusion of normalcy, and that's when he noticed him. A man leaning near the fridge section at the back, pretending to browse but never actually picking anything up. His gaze wasn't on the shelves. It was fixed on the cashier. The man's body language was telling. One shoulder slouched as if concealing something, his stance too rigid, too aware. Daniels recognized the posture instantly. Someone prepared to move fast, someone dangerous. He watched as the man shifted from one foot to the other, his eyes occasionally sweeping the room in quick, sharp glances. Unlike the other customers, this one wasn't shopping, he was waiting, calculating. Daniels knew this wasn't coincidence. The young cashier's note wasn't a false alarm. Inside, the cashier kept moving with robotic precision, scanning items, forcing weak smiles at customers, but his eyes betrayed the truth. Every few seconds, they flickered toward the man by the fridge, then darted quickly away. Daniels understood. This was the one. The suspect had his hooks in the boy, keeping him under control without a word. The gun mentioned in the note was probably hidden under that jacket. And the cashier's life depended on playing along until someone intervened. Daniels' grip on the steering wheel tightened as he weighed his options. A direct confrontation could trigger chaos. The man was too close to the counter, too close to the boy, and if he really had a weapon, innocent customers could be caught in the crossfire. But if Daniels waited too long, the suspect could make his move first. He leaned back slightly in his seat, training his eyes on every twitch, every shift of weight, as though memorizing the rhythm of the scene before stepping into it. And then Daniels noticed something else. The suspect wasn't just watching the cashier, he was watching the windows too. Every time someone walked past, his eyes tracked them until they were gone. The man knew he was exposed, knew that any wrong person could enter and ruin whatever plan he had in motion. It wasn't just a robbery. Daniels could feel it in his gut. This was something bigger, something darker, and the receipt was only the beginning of the story. Officer Daniels knew one wrong move could turn the entire gas station into a battleground. He forced himself to breathe evenly, his years of training guiding every thought. Charging in blindly was out of the question. The cashier was too exposed, and the suspect looked ready to react at the slightest hint of trouble. Daniels had to think like a predator, but act like prey, calm, unnoticed, and deliberate. For now, the best weapon he had was patience. He reached for his radio as casually as someone checking their phone, pressing the button just long enough to call for backup without taking his eyes off the store. His voice was calm, measured, but beneath that calm was a tight coil of urgency. He gave his location, his observation of a possible armed suspect, and requested immediate silent backup. No sirens, no flashing lights. Surprise was their only advantage. From his vantage point, Daniels continued his silent surveillance. The cashier's nervous hands stacked change, bagged items, and tapped keys on the register with the precision of someone performing under duress. The man by the fridge section hadn't moved far, but Daniels could see the subtle twitch of his jaw, the way his hand brushed inside his jacket, as though reassuring himself that the weapon was still there. Every second felt stretched, every gesture loaded with meaning. Daniels' mind mapped out the scene as though it were a chessboard. Where were the exits? How many customers were inside? Who was most vulnerable if the suspect pulled his gun? He noted the easel placements, the blind spots, and the distance between himself and the door. He imagined a dozen outcomes, calculating what to do if the suspect lunged, if the cashier panicked, or if another customer unknowingly walked straight into the danger zone. The pressure of responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders. And yet, through all of it, Daniels kept his expression neutral, blending into the night as though he was just another cop taking a break in his patrol car. But inside, he was coiled like a spring, ready to act the moment backup arrived, or the moment the suspect made his move. The store still looked ordinary to anyone driving past, but Daniels knew better. This wasn't a routine stop anymore. This was the calm before the storm. Just as the minutes dragged into what felt like hours, Daniels noticed a shift. The man who had been loitering by the fridge section straightened up suddenly, his posture sharper, more deliberate. He placed a bottle back on the shelf without even looking at it, and began walking slowly toward the counter. His right hand slipped casually, but purposefully, inside his jacket. Daniels' stomach tightened. He had seen that motion before. It wasn't the move of someone reaching for money. It was the move of someone preparing to draw a weapon. Inside, the cashier's mask of composure cracked ever so slightly. His back stiffened, and his eyes flicked to the glass window, where Daniels' cruiser sat parked outside. That glance wasn't just fear, it was a silent plea, a desperate hope that the officer was still watching. Daniels caught it, and his heart pounded harder. The young worker knew what was coming, and so did Daniels. The situation was shifting from quiet tension into imminent danger. The suspect leaned closer to the counter, lowering his voice so the customers nearby couldn't hear. His lips moved quickly, almost in a hiss. Daniels couldn't make out the exact words, but the effect was immediate. The cashier's face drained of color, his trembling hands fumbling with the register buttons. Whatever had been whispered wasn't a simple demand for cash. No, this was something heavier, something that made the boy freeze like prey cornered by a predator. From the outside, Daniels' training instincts sharpened. He studied the suspect's eyes, narrow, restless, filled with calculation. This wasn't an opportunistic thief, this was someone with a plan. The man wasn't just here to steal. His glances at the windows earlier, his careful control over the cashier, and now his deliberate approach all pointed to something much larger. Daniels felt the weight of it in his chest. He wasn't dealing with a simple robbery. He was dealing with a man ready to risk everything. Daniels tightened his jaw and prepared himself. Backup was on the way, but the window of safety was closing fast. The suspect's hand remained hidden in his jacket, and with each passing second, Daniels knew it could come out holding cold steel. Inside that small, brightly lit store, surrounded by unsuspecting customers, one wrong move could set off a chain reaction of chaos and bloodshed. The silent standoff was nearly at its breaking point. The tension snapped the moment the glass door creaked open. Daniels pushed it forward with calculated force, his body angled, his hand already resting firmly on his weapon. The sound cut through the quiet hum of the gas station like a warning bell. The suspect froze mid-motion, his hand still buried inside his jacket. Customers glanced up briefly, unaware of the danger hovering just inches away from them. But Daniels' voice shattered the illusion of calm. "Police, don't move!" he barked, his tone sharp and commanding, filling the small store with authority. The suspect spun on instinct, his eyes wide and blazing with panic. His right hand flew from his jacket, and in it glinted the unmistakable shape of a gun. Daniels' pulse slammed against his ribs, his finger hovering at the trigger's edge. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Between survival and disaster, between one life saved and many lives lost. But before the suspect could raise the weapon, movement exploded from the shadows near the aisle. Two backup officers surged forward in a blur of speed and precision. They had slipped in silently through the side entrance, timed perfectly with Daniels' command. One officer struck low, ramming the suspect's legs out from under him, while the other lunged high, wrapping him in a crushing hold. The gun clattered across the polished floor, sliding toward the refrigerated section, with a metallic clang that seemed to echo forever. Customers screamed, diving for cover behind shelves and displays. The young cashier dropped to his knees behind the counter, his body trembling so violently he nearly collapsed. His hands clutched the edge of the counter, as if it were the only thing anchoring him to the ground. Daniels kept his weapon trained, moving quickly to kick the discarded gun farther away, ensuring it was out of reach. The suspect thrashed under the weight of the officers, his shouts growing more desperate as steel cuffs snapped around his wrists. For Daniels, the adrenaline was deafening. His heart pounding louder than the ringing bell of the store door, louder than the cries of startled customers. In seconds, the danger had shifted from silent threat to violent reality. And though the suspect was now pinned to the ground, Daniels knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a story that went much deeper than a late-night gas station robbery. The gas station was eerily quiet after the chaos, the only sounds being the labored breathing of the subdued suspect, and the faint buzz of the overhead lights. Customers whispered nervously from their hiding places, slowly emerging as the danger passed. But Daniels' eyes weren't on them. They were on the young cashier, who was pale and drenched in sweat, his wide eyes staring at the gun lying on the floor, as though it were a venomous snake. Daniels approached carefully, lowering his weapon but keeping his tone steady. "You're safe now," he said softly. But the boy shook his head violently, his lips trembling. "No, you don't understand," he whispered. With shaking hands, the cashier explained what had happened. The suspect hadn't just walked into the store moments before. He had been there for hours, keeping the worker under his control. Earlier that night, the man had cornered him in the back office, pressing the cold barrel of the gun against his side. He had whispered a set of chilling instructions: act normal, don't say a word, and wait until he gave the signal. If the cashier slipped up, even once, he would be shot on the spot. The boy had lived every second in terror, hiding his fear behind forced smiles and trembling hands. Daniels felt a cold weight in his chest as the story unfolded. This wasn't some desperate criminal stealing cash from the till. The suspect had been waiting for something, someone, or some moment that hadn't come yet. The robbery was secondary, almost a cover for something more sinister. The young worker admitted he had written the note on the receipt in a split second of courage, knowing it might be his only chance to survive. If Daniels had ignored it, if he had brushed it off as nothing more than paranoia, the outcome could have been far deadlier. The officers hauled the suspect to his feet, but even in cuffs, his expression was defiant. He didn't look like a man caught in a simple crime. His eyes burned with something darker, hatred, calculation, and perhaps even satisfaction that he had almost pulled off whatever plan he had been plotting. Daniels studied him closely, unsettled by the way he stayed silent, offering no explanation, no protest. It was as though he wanted them to wonder, to question what he had really intended to do. As the suspect was led out into the night, Daniels glanced back at the young cashier, who was slumped against the counter, his shoulders shaking as adrenaline drained from his body. The boy's bravery had saved countless lives that night, but the weight of what could have happened lingered heavily in the air. Daniels couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary criminal encounter. Something about the suspect's calm, his silence, and the hours he spent biding his time inside the gas station suggested a darkness far deeper than anyone had realized. That night at the gas station would be remembered not just for the arrest, but for the unspoken message it carried. Evil doesn't always announce itself with sirens and shouting. It hides in plain sight, behind forced smiles and trembling hands. If not for a desperate note scribbled on a receipt, and an officer who trusted his instincts, countless lives might have been lost. The young worker's courage and the officer's vigilance collided in just the right moment, turning what could have been a tragedy into survival. But even with the suspect in custody, one question still lingered. What was he really planning, and why had he waited so long before making his move? To this day, Officer Daniels admits he never looks at a routine stop the same way again. Because sometimes, the smallest clue, a glance, a tremor, a scrap of paper, can uncover the darkest of truths. And the next time you're out in a place that feels perfectly ordinary, remember this: danger doesn't always shout, sometimes it whispers.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.